Welcome to Spotlight on the Arts. I'm Iris Acker, and I'm hosting today's segment. I'd like you to meet our prestigious panel. I'm going to start with Michael McKeever, playwright. Sitting next to him is Karen Stevens, award-winning actress, and she writes too. Bill Hirschman, our theater critic, among other things.
Prestigious.
Prestigious and award-winning too, among other things. And whether he's award-winning or not, our guest today is Neil Goldberg, and the show is about Neil Goldberg's Cirque. Wow, I love saying that, though, I really do. Neil, welcome once again.
Thank you, nice to be here.
We've become good friends as a result of being on the show so often. Why do I have you here so often? Because you have so much to share, and it's so very exciting. We don't know where to begin today. I'm going to let you begin. I'm going to say something I say very often. I say, what got you where you are today for all these various cirques that are being performed all over the world, not just locally, for sure. You're on.
You know, it's a very interesting story. When I was 6 years old, my mom took me to see my first Broadway show. It was The Miracle Worker, the story of Helen Keller. And I was fascinated. I mean, that's when I tell people that's when I was bit by the bug. But what was so interesting is what fascinated me the most was the stage setting, the way her house, you could see the perspective of it from sitting in the audience, and the way she moved through the house in a way that the audience can really follow the journey. And that night I went home and I took about a half a dozen shoe boxes from my mom's closet, threw out the shoes, discarded them, and recreated the set, the actual house with these shoes boxes. Then continued on to make toy furniture from little popsicle sticks and things like that. 16 years later, I got my degree in scenic design from C.W. Post College in Long Island. So I am by trade a scenic designer, and then have had a career of involvement in community theater and regional theater and Broadway until actually owning my own production company and creating what is today a globally renowned brand entitled Cirque Dreams.
How do you define Cirque? I mean, as compared to, I mean, we know we do a lot of Broadway shows, a lot of theater here, a lot of theater. We talk about films, we talk about television. Now we're talking about a cirque? Help me.
Well, the word cirque is French for circus. And so I think people have an expectation when they understand what the word is. I think they have an expectation of what they're going to see in a show that's titled with the word in it. Mm-hmm. But what I've done with the Cirque Dreams brand is I've infused it with my own Broadway theatrics, my own style, my own background. And we tell people that if you're coming to see one of our shows, it's not just a Cirque show. It's part Cirque or part circus, part Broadway musical, a lot of imagination, and all put together becomes a stage spectacle. And, you know, like all producers, we're holding auditions throughout the year in New York City. We're working with, you know, Broadway equity and non-equity actors and actresses, but we're blending them with performance artists that come from all over the world, whether it be a juggler or a contortionist or a musician or violinist that can play their instrument by suspended upside down. So, you know, we sort of look for that wow factor and that uniqueness, and we blend it all together, and that's what's creating these great theatrical experiences for audiences when they come to see a Cirque Dreams show.
Neil, on any given day, how many shows do you have traveling around the world?
On any given day, it sort of ranges between 5 and 7.
Wow.
So therefore, we're looking about 150 to 200 artists that we are moving every single day and every single week throughout the world, from performing arts centers to different theaters to arenas to wherever the shows are being produced. So that in itself is a business.
It sounds exhausting. It sounds like almost an overwhelming venture.
Right. He's not a one-man band. He has help.
Right, and that's what I was going to add. You know, I mean, we've been doing it now. Cirque Dreams has been in existence for 20 years, and I'm proud of the fact that the first 3 employees, and Michael, you actually know some of them because you were there at the beginning.
I remember.
Are still there, but we're 30 strong in the corporate office. Wow. We have our own travel department. We have our own immigration department. We manufacture and produce all the costumes in-house. We have our own training and rehearsal facility. But at the same time, we're teching and rehearsing shows in performing arts centers throughout the world, throughout the country.
And it's
interesting. It's all different.
So many different themes. We're going to talk about that as we go.
But it's also very interesting because, what I bring back here is the perspective of how spectacular theater is in South Florida and how it compares to what goes on in other cities. We have so much theater here in South Florida, and there's so much of the same that goes on with Broadway shows and touring shows that are looking for different theaters, whether it be community or regional or localized, to tech and rehearse. Because theater it's a worldwide industry. It's not just for people in their own backyard anymore.
That's a great point. That's a great. It really is. So, when you create your shows, how do you decide which show goes where, or is there a method to that?
A method to the madness. Thank God there's such a thing called as a booking agency. That's the only thing that as a businessman I've chosen not to do myself. I let that go through the traditional Broadway and off-Broadway booking regimens. And so we have a booking agency based out of New York City. The interesting thing about our business is there's so many of us creative people, but we're really sort of a small little world. Mm-hmm. And after you do it for a few years, we all get to know each other. Like, you know everyone, you know so many people in your field and in your field. It's the same thing in producing. When I produced the first Cirque Dreams show on Broadway in 2008, I thought, oh my God, how am I going to produce on Broadway? I mean, what do I know about producing on Broadway? And I remember sitting at a meeting around a table just like this and saying to people, how am I going to learn all this? And they said, you're going to figure it out, just like you did everything else. And so many of the same people that are producing theater, whether it be from Texas to Arizona to Tennessee, these are the same people that are producing on Broadway and in their own backyards in both touring Broadway and regional and community theater. So you sort of figure this stuff out and you become one big happy family.
Why don't you take one of your current shows and talk about the process? I know this is not something that starts with an idea and a month or two later you've got it up. Talk about the gestation and the process that you go through with one of the shows that you've done.
Sure. Well, we're about to remount a show that I spent several years producing called Cirque Dreams Rocks. And it's an interesting business. When you're out there, whether it's locally or whether it's nationally or internationally, you meet so many people. So one day I get a phone call from an executive at Sony Music. And he happened to be an audience member at one of my shows. And he says, I love what you're doing. We have this enormous catalog of music that we represent, that we own. We'd love for you to listen to this catalog and see if there's something that you want to do with it. So of course I go, wow, this is great. Sony Music, and they're offering me, the license rights to all their music. A year and a half later, after getting through 50,000 songs, because it sounds easy, but it's really not. So the first process took a year and a half to listen to 50,000 songs for me and a team of creative people to identify with, to say, okay, what's the demographic of this song? Are mom and dad going to recognize it? Are the grandparents going to recognize it? Are the kids going to recognize it? Is it popular? Is it being remade? Are we hearing it on the radio? Are we hearing it on the internet? And then we whittle it down to 21 songs. So then we sort of have, that creates, in the theater world, the arc to our show. We have 21 songs that now our brand of entertainment wants to reimagine and bring those things to life with great singers, great acting, and great performance artistry. So we sit, and each song goes on a little card, and we start identifying different talent that we think can complement what that song might be, and then we just start moving it around like a puzzle. And 3 years later, from listening to the first song, we actually premiere a show entitled Cirque Dreams Rocks.
When you say we, I assume that you mean your team.
Correct.
And what does that consist of, or who does that consist of?
Other directors, artistic directors, choreographers, musical director, there's 2 of them, obviously, with recomposing and reorchestrating all of the music. Talent scouts, we have our own talent scouts in-house, and we're working with talent scouts throughout the world. Fortunately, with the internet and computers today, years ago I had to get on a plane and go to some of these places. I now no longer have to go to the State School of Contortion in Mongolia, or go to the Beijing Acrobatic Association, or go have a conversation with the government of Ethiopia and their very enriched circus arts program. We can communicate all this talent and all this information via the internet. So we have people in all of these departments. At some point we sit with the designers, the set designers and the costume designers. Because of the fact that my skill set is so broad, I'm at the helm of the ship, which I think there always needs to be a strong leader to help you get to the finish line in both a passionate and a great executive way. But yeah, that's the team.
What I like is some of them are done on the water, some of them are on ships. So diversified. He actually has a Cirque show that's done in the water. Am I correct?
Yeah, we have a great partnership with Norwegian Cruise Line. Again, another interesting story that plays to how long does this process start. We're here in South Florida. This is our home of the cruise industry. It really is one of the largest cruise ports in the world. And, I've had conversations with many of the cruise lines throughout the years about creating an interesting and innovative show at sea, but it wasn't until I was invited to sit with the folks at Norwegian that they sort of wanted to open the boundaries, that it was no longer going to be the typical cruise ship show. And they said, give it your best shot and tell us what you can come up with. And so I had this vision of not just taking the Cirque Dreams brand, but just theater in general. One of my own personal passionate goals in my career, before it ends, is I want to reinvent dinner theater. I think so many of us know dinner theater. I remember my parents, I grew up in New York. They always used to go to Westbury Music Fair. It was always had a traditional dinner theater where they would talk about they had the chicken or the steak dinner. They would sit at these tables. They'd look at the stage. The meal was finished. They'd watch the show. They'd get their coffee and they'd leave.
I performed in those shows.
Well, they were great. But my goal was always to, and still is, to reinvent it in a way. I've been able to do it at sea, and now I'm working on trying to do it at land. I wanted everything from the napkins and the tablecloths and the food presentation and the servers and the service and how it was being presented to be choreographed as part of the theatrical entertainment experience from beginning to end. And so that's what we have very successfully done on 2 Norwegian cruise ships, the Epic and the Breakaway. And we're now working with a couple of organizations, and hopefully within the next 2 years, there'll be a great announcement about Cirque Dreams and Dinner on land in different venues, looking at one right here in Fort Lauderdale. And people will get to sit and have a great culinary dining experience that will be choreographed and designed and presented as part of the arc of their theatrical experience.
That's wonderful. It must be difficult. To go back to the cruise ships, though, I know that the cruise ship shows that are being done now have to make allowances for heavy seas, and that, for instance, dance choreograph routines are changed depending on how rough the seas are. So doing Cirque acts must be an extremely difficult challenge. How do you meet that?
It is. It's challenging. We actually have set up in our facility a mock recreation facility of the venue that we're performing in. But what's really so interesting about what we do, it's a lot more risky and challenging than a song and dance show. But when you're swinging in the air and the ships are moving, you have less margin for error because you're swinging than if you were standing and tilted and knocked yourself off. So it's one of our little secrets. But we do defy the laws of gravity, and we have our plan A and our plan B and our plan C, and we work very, very closely with the captain of the ship and the ships today. These are mega yachts, ships, cruise lines, and they have stabilizers that they put out, and the shows are timed for certain times of the day in certain places where they know they're going to be in the seas. But I read these show reports. Another part of my job is I wake up every morning and I am reading a show report from every show. It takes me the first 3 to 4 hours of my day to just go through every single department of every single show, from safety to wardrobe to lighting to sound to the teeniest little detail to see what's going on.
I was going to ask that. I take it you're still involved with every single production that you because I know how meticulous you are about your shows. So even with that you've become this international brand, Do you have time? Are you involved with every single show?
I am, to the extent that I have time to do everything that it is that I need to do. You know, in the world of business, we call the style of what all of us do micromanaging. In the world of theater, we call it perfectionism. and it's a disease for all of us. But it's our greatest asset, and it's our worst detriment, because it never lets us stop. Because I'm sure the rest of you can relate. If as soon as you have a break, if you have 2-3 days where you have nothing to do, are not your minds going like, what's out there? What am I missing? What do I need to see? What do I need to do? What's next? And so it's the same thing. And so, you know, I read these show reports, and fortunately I delegate, and, you know, we have departments that can handle all this, but if I miss something, I feel incomplete.
Interesting. Okay, you delegate, he delegates. But 5-6 shows all over the world. It's interesting, earlier we had Mary Luft on, who does not approve of looking at tapes. She's still going to Paris and to Rome to pick up for Tiger Tail Productions. You sit there and literally look at hundreds of tapes and can cast that way.
Yeah, but our process is a bit more full cycle than that. We wouldn't necessarily just look. We have a casting department. We receive no less than 50 applications or inquiries or submissions every single week, from whether it's performers that are coming out of, you know, the Boston Conservatory or NYU Theater School, to artists that are doing crazy things from all over the world. And that goes to our casting department. They know at this point what we're looking for, and so they'll whittle it down, and maybe I'll see a dozen of the top or the best or what they think is appropriate for what we're doing. Because of the success that our company has and to the level that we've grown, we invest in performers, and I'm proud of the fact that we invest in performers. So when I say we'll find somebody through a video, we'll find them and invest in them and bring them to our studio, and that's where they'll have their last audition. And if for some reason we didn't, you know, hit the nail on the head, or it's not the perfect fit, you know, we'll send them back home. They understand what they're doing when they're coming. But we have a pretty good track record, 95% of the time. You know, it's a perfect fit, and we bring them here, and we house them here, and we train them, and sometimes we'll keep an artist here in Fort Lauderdale for a year before they'll go into one of the shows.
Wow.
So, you know, imagine a performer in China or Hungary or Cuba or Russia having the opportunity to come to Florida for a year to train and rehearse and practice to potentially go out on the road into a show.
Wow.
Not a bad gig.
Not a bad gig. Absolutely.
Tell me.
Not a bad gig.
How many artists do you let's say represent? Is that a good way to describe it?
Yeah, I think that I'm not sure what the bottom line is employee.
There you go.
because they have to be employees.
Right.
Today, everybody is an employee.
Well, how many artists do you have in your, let's say, stable that you have in your shows?
Right now, we have on a year-round basis, we have about 160 averaging working all the time.
Wow.
But there's about that amount, about another 150 to 200 that are either in development or in discussions or practicing or submitting or something that we're looking at and considering. And again, with many of these artists, even the traditional actors and actresses that come from a much different training and regimen. You know, I just recently visited some of our shows, and I'm very attracted to the musical theater performers that we audition and we hire in New York, because I'm very interested in their take on the theatricality of what we're doing. Because these are performers that are, you know, coming out of Fiddler on the Roof and going into Jersey Boys, and, you know, and somewhere in the middle they wind up singing or acting in a Cirque Dreams show, and it's important. Their feedback, and, you know, is important for me in terms of the experience. And so, you know, I'm attracted to sitting and talking to these artists, and they share with me stories about how they're sharing with their friends. You know, social networking is beyond out of control today. And so they're sharing with me the stories of how they're sharing with their, you know, co-actors and actresses about how unique this experience is, how it takes so many of the things that they've learned to do and not to do, and gives them an opportunity to interpret it on stage in a much different fashion than the way they were educated or thought that they would.
Does budget have anything to do with your creative process? I once interviewed, I'm going to pronounce his name wrong, but Franco Dragone from the other Cirque.
Right.
And his development process is he basically takes a lot of drinks and comes up with an idea, and he takes this dream that he has and he takes it to his designers and says, you figure it out. I mean it. He says that, I come up with an idea, you figure out a way to make this real. But he has a budget, that's the equal of a small
hundreds
country.
of millions of dollars.
I'm assuming that you have real budget constraints that you have to actually work within.
Yeah, very much so. And because growing up as an artist was my passion, and being a businessman was my parents' passion, I got a minor degree in business administration. Mm-hmm. So my major degree was in scenic design, but I had to obviously fulfill what my parents' desires and wishes were for my degree. And so the business part of it is very much forefront in everything that we do. Fortunately, the company has grown to the point that we would spend an average of $1.5 million on a new show, which is pretty comparable to any major Broadway touring show that's leaving the city and then going out on the road in terms of what an investment would be to do something like that. What I'm proud personally about is that I've never done, as I think most of us have never done what we do for money. It's really about passion first. And they say that, if you're passionate about it and you execute it well and and you persevere, the money will follow. And so for me, it has, but the money is funded back into the company so that we have the ability to create budgets and to support different styles of production. On the budget part, I'd also like to mention that, as a result of my passion for this, 5 years ago, I decided to take a portion of every ticket sale from every single show that we sell, wherever it is in the world, and fund a foundation that I started called the Neil Goldberg Dream Foundation. And what that foundation does is it actually enriches the lives of young artists and art organizations, not just in South Florida, but anywhere in the world where we feel that there's an opportunity to cultivate and grow and develop. And so
what kinds of, give us some examples.
Well, we've been very supportive of South Plantation High School here in South Florida. There's always these competitions where they're trying to gather funds and go from city to city and participate. There have been some art programs in some other cities that have had some difficult times, and we'll get a solicitation, and that's where the organization and that's where the foundation can help. And it's something that people don't know so much about. And I think whenever I have an opportunity to speak, it's important to me to get out to people, not just that I started at 6 years of age and I had a dream and it's turned into a reality, but you've got to give back.
And look at
you've got to pay it forward.
Competition, is it good for you or is it bad for you? Let's talk about competition. The other Cirque, of course, Cirque du Soleil. Are there other Cirques out there?
I think there are. I know that symphonies of late have tried to integrate in this style of performance artistry because it's so appealing to such a broad range of audiences that everybody's looking for that wow factor. And at the end of the day, what we all do is we have to put the bodies in the seats. We try to find creative ways to do it. We may go out and read dialogue or sing a song. We'll go on television programs. We'll go and promote ourselves. But at the end of the day, we have to find a way to reach people and get those bodies into the seats.
Whether it's comparison, do you find that comparing one Cirque to another Cirque?
I think that people have a perception of what they expect to see in a show that has the word Cirque in it. Yes. And the other company, the Montreal-based company, has so many other shows that are out there. And one of the things that we've distinguished ourselves and differentiated ourselves with is the fact that we're taking these tours and these shows to cities around the country and around the world. We're bringing them to local performing arts centers. Not everyone can afford to get on an airplane and go to Las Vegas and go to Broadway and see a Broadway show. And I think it's really important that so much of what we do, even with regional and community theater, that we have to continue to bring the arts to people's backyards so they can be enriched, not just when they get on an airplane and go to Vegas or New York City.
Unbelievable. You have a phenomenal company. I've been to your facility, of course. What you've done there is remarkable. If you were no longer there, it will go on. Will Neil Goldberg Cirque be in perpetuity?
Wow, that's a good question. You know, I would like to think so. I was blessed with a very unique gift and very fortunate that I've been able to turn my imagination and creativity into a business. I think that so many of the employees, I said there's a core team of 30 people. Those 30 people, the average length of employment has probably been over 15 years, and the company's only been in existence for 20.
Wow.
So they know what they're doing. The team is there. We have been approached by some impressive entertainment organizations about mergers and acquisitions. I still have way too much left in my head that I need to do before that happens.
I wish we had the time to find out what else is in your head. We just have time to summarize and say we look forward. Don't you have a Christmas Cirque? Don't you have a spring? I mean, it's all year round, different themes. I can't say to you what's coming up next because there's always coming up next. They continue in the forms they are, and you continue to form new ones as far as that goes.
Do you have any in the pipeline right now?
Yeah, well, so obviously we're working, there's 2 Cirque Dreams and Dinner at Sea, and we're working on Batted Land. We have Cirque Dreams Splashtastic, which is a water show, which opened last year in San Francisco in conjunction with Six Flags, a Discovery Kingdom out there. We have the Sony Music one, which is Cirque Dreams Rocks. Jungle Fantasy, of course, is my child. It's the first Cirque show that ever appeared on a Broadway stage. We're going to be remounting that in a new fashion and bringing that out in the future. There's the holidays.
Ends up with a wow factor. He mentioned a wow. All his shows have that wow factor.
Right.
And you do every time you're with us. And I have to thank you again and again, and you'll be back again. I know it, Neil. You always have so much to say. I just enjoy so much having him here, as I do all of you too, of course. And I enjoy knowing that you're there to support us and watch us. And what I also encourage you to do is to support all the theater in South Florida, please. And how you can do that and find out what's going on, just tune in to go to the website of FloridaTheaterOnStage.com. Oh, and please continue to watch us right here every week at Spotlight on the Arts. Thank you.